Hello and welcome to the Week in Review, QTV's weekly look back over the last 7 weeks, top stories or most interesting stories from both home and abroad. And as usual, we have a varied program for you. We'll be looking at a new political party that had its first rally this week. We're also looking back over some gruesome revelations at the TRRC, and abroad we'll be looking at child soldiers in South Sudan and see how they're getting on. And here to help me analyze some of those stories is my partner in crime, Mr. Mohammed Mboj. Mr. Mboj, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ade. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And now, as I said, in case this is the first time you're watching the Week in Review, what we do is we look back over some of the top stories of the week and we analyze them and we discuss them. And it's no different this week. And let's get straight to the discussions. A new political party held its first rally, not just any political party. And as I think you'll gather from this clip, it has a particular relevance for this country and this country's future. Let's watch a clip.
Having registered in 2 months ago, the National People's Party machinery has swung into action, trying to win hearts and minds, as well as strengthen their party support in the country to successfully contest political races. The NPP gathered people from different parts of the Upper River region to hold its first political rally in the country. The agenda of the meeting was to discuss politics and familiarize the people with the new party ahead of future elections. President Barrow told his supporters that his government will bring developments to the region. Speaking in local languages, the president promised to solve the electricity needs of villages without electricity in the region, claiming that $40 million have already been secured from China for the project. The NPP party leader acknowledges Hamad Nkeba, Henry Gomez, and the diaspora for supporting his political ambitions. In the 2021 presidential elections, Mr. Barrow hopes that it will be a political contest out of which he will emerge victorious.
And of course, finally it happened. There'd been much talk about it. Finally, the president launched his own political party. Now, Mr. Mboj, I know you might have been slightly disappointed because President was always banging on about National Development Plan, and you thought that he might be very clever and use National Development Party, but it didn't quite work out that way. What did you think of the scenes that you saw when this was launched?
Absolutely, and I wasn't the only one who was wrong-footed in this, because I remember somewhere reading that Usain Dabo thought that there was an NDP party somewhere. Yes, I mean, when he introduced, the party was registered December 31st, wasn't it?
That's
so
correct.
It's been 3 months or so. Yeah. So one would expect it perhaps to be introduced formally, and where better to do so than URR, Upper River region.
Did you expect him to launch it whilst he was in the midst of what was essentially an official tour?
Well, yes, you know, the lines have been blurred now for a very long time. Our politics, we really cannot run away from that now on. So, expected, to be quite honest, expected. So, but yes, they had to introduce the party sooner or later.
And what did you think of the fact that there were leaders of other political parties sort of throwing their hat into the ring in support of the president?
National Reconciliation Party. I mean, Aman Hamad Ba, I couldn't believe when he said that Barrow was the solution to our problems and stuff like that. And I thought, I wonder what other members of the NRP think about that. And what else are you saying? You've essentially thrown in the towel because Barrow's got the trump card. Right. So be careful you do not turn that NRP into a mere appendage of the NPP.
And I remember when we were discussing this in the office when this was first broadcast, you made actually quite a telling. You said, are we seeing a different kind of coalition being formed? I mean, is that how you see it?
Absolutely, big time. I mean, that one is already on the GPDC as well. We've seen sort of unspoken, as it were, coalition there. And yes, and others. Possibly others will also follow, because right now being NPP must be very attractive because of incumbency and all the rest of it.
You mentioned Hamad N.K. Barr, he wasn't the only one. There were other cabinet ministers there also bigging up the president and his party at a political rally.
Yes, Musa Drame, the minister for lands. But yes, I suppose with ministers it's more political. Maybe what I want to ask, for instance, Musa Drame is whether officially he's part of the party, of the NPP. You do not know yet. I mean, he was there to big him up, but I'm not sure.
Which is kind of what I was getting to, because when you have somebody who's a cabinet minister or you have somebody who's a member of parliament appearing at what is ostensibly the new party's first political rally, it wasn't just anything, it was quite a statement. I mean, for them to go there and make statements in support of the president, in support of the party effectively, have they now joined that party? I think they need to be asked, and we need to be told.
Essentially, they've essentially pledged their loyalty by being there, and some of them, what they said, it is unmistakable that they've pledged their loyalty. Whether they've joined officially or not, we might be interested in that, but we understand now the motives, we understand the person, the positions.
Now, you mentioned there about, the fact that this happened in URR. In terms of the crowds, were you surprised or pretty much what you would have expected?
Pretty much what one would expect. I mean, son of the region, he's also the president.
Yes.
So they feel pride in that. It's easier to support. So all the pieces are there really for him to be popular.
Sure.
in many ways. So.
Yes, you say that. I mean, one of the things that on Drive Time we've discussed, which some of the viewers may not be aware of, was when this whole thing about 3 years, 5 years was coming up. We heard the president make some quite extravagant promises at this rally. One is tempted to be mischievous and say, but yes, you're the same one who said you would step down after 3 years. So why should we believe these promises now?
You? Absolutely. I mean, yes, that's the rational thing, perhaps, one should think. But let's be honest, the kind of electorate, what we are dealing with, you know what I mean? We would ask the questions, but there are other considerations more important for the electorate than this rationalist sort of with intellectuals, with us journalists, how we would discuss it. I don't think that would make much of a dent. It will make no effect in the end, really, to whom the electorate would pledge their loyalty.
Well, thanks for that, Mr. Mboj. Now, as my colleague and friend there says, we will see the party, just to update our viewers, held its second rally this week. So they've had two in the space of a week. And again, yet very big crowds, and yet more people pledging their loyalty, including some that people might find surprising doing so, but I won't spoil the fun for you. You'll have to keep watching QTV over the next few days to find out that one. But thank you for that, Mr. Mboj, for that intervention. And now on to the TRRC. This week we heard revelations from one Ensa Keita. Most people, I have to be honest, when we started watching this in the office, we were saying, gosh, this looks fairly boring. Should we bother to watch? Should we switch off, turn the sound down, and so on? However, what we then heard made it one of the most riveting, gruesome, grisly testimonies that we have ever heard on this. Let's just take a look and a listen to what he had to say.
Explain some of the horrible things he experienced from Sanamanjang.
Sometimes I used to have nightmares about it. When he swung the sword on Skadali, he chopped off his leg from here. He came to his waist and he chopped it off. After he cut it off, the chest, this part, he placed it like this. He took a cutlass. He tore it in the middle. Suleiman Sambu brought a bag, a sack. I recognized the sack. It was a sugar bag. When they put him inside,
who did the chopping?
Sana.
Ensa said Sanamanjang cut the alleged rebel's body into pieces and fed his remains to crocodiles while their chopped heads were taken.
There we heard Ensa Keita talking about his ordeal. As with his testimony, his involvement actually started out fairly innocuously. He'd done some sand mining and so on, bricklaying and that sort of thing, and that was how he got drawn into the web of ex-President Jammeh's sort of a sphere. But then what happened to him, 52 days of incarceration, and then he related some of what had happened to him. And I can tell you there were people gasping and shouting in the audience and in the office when we first heard this testimony. Mr. Mboj, I said in the introduction, grisly, gruesome. It actually took some hard listening to. There had to be a warning by SFR to parents not to let children under 16 watch it. We had to run a streamer across the television screen warning people not to let children under 16 watch and listen to this. What did you think of that testimony?
I mean, the first time we've had to do that, even though in the past we've also heard some really gruesome stories and stuff. Absolutely. I mean, the whole experience, let's be honest with it, since the beginning of the TRRC for me, the whole experience has felt like a kind of, we're in the middle of this medieval Gothic tale that was being told right here in Gambia, friendly Gambia, nice Gambia, but just here, there, chopping up people. I mean, it was unbelievable.
And throwing them to the crocodiles.
Throwing them to the crocodiles. I mean, come on, we used to talk about the missing link. I mean, one doesn't want to hit below the belt, but when you think about such a behavior, you're like, wow, there is such a thing as the missing link.
I think one of the things that was quite instructive for me was that a colleague of ours had been traveling between buildings and had missed the whole testimony. And so I said to him, had you heard anything of it? Because he was in a vehicle. He said, no, none of it. I said, it's pretty gruesome, it's pretty grisly. He said, well, we've heard all that stuff. I said, no, I think you need to listen to this one. And so he watched it when it was replayed that night, and he was pretty shocked. I was pretty shocked. One wonders, are we likely to hear more of this kind of stuff? You talk about the sort of missing link and the sort of behavior that led to that sort of thing. I mean, it was really quite ghastly.
Absolutely, and when you think about it, just when you think that you've sort of bottomed out, you wouldn't hear any worse than we've done so far. But again, something comes up, then you think you ratchet down a bit. There's a single ratchet, or two ratchets down. So
and that was what I told my colleague. I said, you know, when he said, oh, you know, seen and heard it all before, I said, well, I think what you're going to hear later tonight when you watch is probably worse than you've heard thus far. But the other discussion that grew out of this was that he names certain people, Sanya Manjang, and you wonder, the discussion was, should these people now, the ones who are alive, should they be brought before either courts here, international courts, for crimes against humanity, that sort of thing? What's your opinion on that?
Sana Manjan, for a long time, we used to hear his name all the time in the grapevine. The way he's described, he's sort of the quintessential jungler.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Right.
So that tells you the reputation was all over the place. Well, we understand that anybody adversely mentioned would be given an adverse mention notice.
Yeah, quite. Yeah.
So we do not know. I think he is at large. I have once heard a rumor. We don't want to ply in rumors, but we are in territory where we do not have many facts.
Quite.
So
yes.
you've got a lot of speculation.
Sure.
I've heard that perhaps it was in Guinea-Bissau.
Guinea-Bissau was what I heard
That's
as well.
also you've heard. That's it. So if there's any way we can confirm that, perhaps we can appeal to the Guinea-Bissau authorities. At any rate, we serve him, because I also know that they have powers of subpoena.
Sure.
That is also one of their powers. So there are various things that could be explored.
Now, the reason I mention this is because in the sort of adverse mentions he's had, they're similar to the ones that Edward Singate had. And yet he came and he tried to charm us all. Didn't quite succeed. But many people are saying that he appears to have gotten away scot-free. Is this likely to be the fate that would meet Manjang, based on what's been said about him?
Yeah, I don't think Edward has got scot-free. This is just temporary. I mean, we are in very complex times. We shouldn't say that. Yes, he came over, tried to charm his way out of things, but any sober minded person could see through him.
Sure.
So most of us didn't buy that. And it is a very difficult situation. The TRRC, that's what they are in, and even the government. I mean, notionally, we ought to wait until the end of the 2 years.
Of course.
But yet, there would be certain imperatives that come along. I mean, how do you deal with them? Yeah. Still adversely mentioned soldiers still serving. What do you decide? What do you do? Even though we know that we've got a prosecution, at least in Yankuba, that was because of what he did. So if Senator Manjang or anybody think that you can come and play the system, well, I think you will have something else coming. But yet you would realize that you would have to come and face it. Sure. In the end, Edward came, testified, and temporarily he is off to go and do his own business.
Yeah, indeed, yes. All that
that's
hugging with him and Sana at the end was rather sickening, I thought, but
absolutely.
It wasn't my doing. But as you say, there are likely to be more. And I think we have to wait. And to those who are watching and listening, the TRRC, keep watching, keep listening, because when they're finished, of course, they're going to give their reports and their recommendations, and then we shall see. But I think people are sort of preempting and saying people have gotten away scot-free. It might not quite be the case.
At all. I mean, I think the critical points, really, the talking points wouldn't be really the TRRC and their report. It's when they submit to the political masters what they will do with it. We've got a taster of it with the Jana report.
Indeed.
The Jana Commission report. So it will largely really depend on what the political masters do.
Yes, and I think we've already heard whispers that the likes of the EU and the United States don't want any of these people to get away scot-free, and might take it upon themselves to say they kind of, they don't want to say anything too much whilst these hearings are going on. But they might want to pursue it further and take it onto an international stage. But we wait and see. And thanks again for that, Mr. Mboj.
Thank you.
And so there we have it, gruesome revelations at the TRC. And I have to say, they're on YouTube and so on, but please, if you do have young children, do not let them watch. The revelations were truly gruesome and some of the worst we've heard by far. So please heed this warning. It's not made idly. Now on to something quite different. And again, we mentioned His Excellency the President is on this tour of Upper Region, and he inaugurated a road which I'm reliably informed is the longest in the Gambia, the Laminkoto-Pasamas Road. Let's take a quick look at some of what happened when he inaugurated this new road.
It was a scene of celebration of national development. Senior government officials, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens of the Gambia gathered to witness and celebrate this momentous occasion.
I urge all users, more so the communities living along the corridor, to follow the traffic rules and all road safety regulations developed for our general safety and comfort, so that all of us will continue to enjoy our roads with ease and comfort.
The Laminkoto-Pasamas Road is now the longest road in the Gambia, costing approximately $62 million, measuring over 120 kilometers. The road is expected to ease trade, access to agricultural lands, market, healthcare and education facilities, and over 100,000 locals are likely to be directly benefiting from it.
I have to be honest, I deliberately chose the clip where His Excellency the President started by mentioning safety and road safety, because as the road was about to be inaugurated, it had its first accident. Those of you who know me know what I think about driving in the Gambia. Mr. Mboj, that aside, quite an impressive structure from the footage that we saw. What are your views on this, particularly the sort of connecting sort of north-south of this road?
Absolutely, connecting north-south, apparently what, 121 kilometers, and this time it's got drainages.
150 kilometers.
150 kilometers,
Indeed,
so
yes.
that was what we had, and at a cost of what, nearly $70 million, and it all started some time back. Oh, absolutely, I mean, anything to bring us together. I mean, we know that we talk about infrastructure really being the bedrock of really any development.
Yeah.
So there would be easy movements of services and people and all the rest of it. So it has to be a good thing.
And as you rightly say, it started a while ago, but I think it was mentioned there, and certainly on the news report, that before this president came in, only 40 kilometers had been completed. And so the 110 that was subsequently completed, needed extra funding and were completed under President Barrow's watch. But you rightly say about connectivity, about good traffic links and so on. And of course, one hopes that not just major roads get fixed, but our side roads as well, because that's quite a problem. But I think the thing about joining communities and along the way, because what tends to happen when you build a road like this is that communities form alongside good roads. I mean, what's your thought on that?
Absolutely, and we also want to stem somehow the rural-urban drift. So we must provide them with the sort of infrastructure, the sort of structures there that would incentivize them. There would be an incentive for them to stay. And yes, this is where you get bustling life sort of will begin to emerge because of that connectivity.
Because we've seen through history, and not just in the Gambia, but around the world, that when you build good roads like this, it fosters trade links. Those who have to take goods to market can do so, successfully and quite well, because there are good transportation links. And I guess this has to be one of the things that the president is looking forward to. But you mentioned the kind of rural-urban drift is something that we're trying to counter, and surely this must be a big boost to actually addressing that and redressing it, if one could say.
Absolutely, there's too much pressure. I think is it what 65% of our population all live in the urban, and they will keep on coming. So it will get worse. So the sooner we start, the sooner we begin to provide the structures over there that would make people to remain, and the better for us. We all talking about the youth bulge that is coming. It's coming from everywhere. So it will attack.
That's right.
It will be a huge pressure on the urban.
Because what you have is, of course, they talk about wanting to turn this around, but what is there to make them stay? Why shouldn't they kind of make the drift? You hear people talking about the country being overcrowded, and then when you drive, you could drive for miles, for hours, and not see a soul, not a house, not a building, not a structure. So it's not overcrowded. It's just people are congregating rather in certain areas. And I guess this has to be something that must be on the minds of those who are, sort of promoting trade, promoting the kind of thing, saying people stay in your communities and trade from there, come to the urban, but go back, and so your communities don't die.
Oh yes, and here we're talking about the private sector has to be part of really just the engine of growth, and really has to be at the heart of any strategy really for us to move forward, to develop. That is why perhaps there's an emphasis on entrepreneurship, training, and that sort of thing. So this is where we can use the private sector and look at the rural areas. What do we need to do for people to stay? I mean, the basic services we talk about, that with education, health, and all of these things must be put in place. There's really no two-way about it. If that doesn't happen, people will keep on coming over will keep on coming to the urban areas, and that would be an indictment on the failure of their policies, whatever they have. So you cannot hide. Numbers will speak for themselves.
And I think what you've just mentioned there is actually will be reflected in one of the other topics that we'll discuss on this show. This whole thing about building certain infrastructures to get people to stay in their communities and kind of make their communities grow rather than be depleted because they're all rushing to get to the urban areas where they think life is good and everything is great. Wait till they come here and find out about all the power cuts we get. So then they might change their minds. But I think it's now time for us to take a commercial break. And it will be a short one, but when we come back, we'll have some more stories, including transportation for doctors and nurses to ease their journey to work. Stay with us, and we'll be back after this quick break.
Oh yes, Pura Vida evaporated milk is the most nutritious milk of the day. Pura Vida milk contains 4 major nutrients to strengthen the bones, increases energy, improve growth, and helps with the vision. Pura Vida is highly nutritional and enriched with vitamin C and D. Pura Vida evaporated milk is available in most shops and supermarkets nationwide. Pura Vida is available in 170 grams and 410 grams. Pura Vida, evaporated milk of great preference.
When electricity goes off, even for a few hours, life is disrupted. Control your power and your life with the Perkins Texan standby generator supplied by Timber Company. When utility power is restored, Perkins generator automatically shuts off and returns to standby mode, ready and waiting to protect your home. Perkins Texan standby generator, reliable, quality, affordable, and efficient. Texan Perkins, supplied and maintained by Timber Company Limited, your answer to uninterrupted power right at your doorstep. Visit us today at number 60 Bertil Harding Highway, opposite Wyas, for best fit solutions for you. Call us on 345-6789, 767-6769, or 767-6768. Feel the power with Texan Perkins.
Welcome back. And just before the break there, I mentioned that we'll be seeing another story about buses provided for the staff of the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital. Let's have a quick look at this clip, and then we come back, we will discuss what this means for the staff of the hospital.
It is very important for healthcare personnel to report to work in a timely fashion, to be where they are supposed to be on time. And of course, it is important for them equally to get home on time when they close from work, so they can get adequate rest to prepare for the next day. Without our own transportation here, that's very difficult. And lateness, which is soon not to be tolerated. We never encourage it, certainly, but with the support, I don't think lateness will be tolerated. In any case, this will minimize lateness, because if people come by the bus, that is not late by itself. That means people will certainly not be late to come to work.
Now, just before the break, I mentioned about buses being provided for staff of the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital. It's quite amusing that at the launch, the minister was making the jokes, saying no excuse for being late. Mr. Mboch, this is long overdue, surely, buses that take our doctors and nurses, pick them up and take them to and from work.
Absolutely. Anybody who commutes, using public transport, and that's what I do, you will know really how difficult it is, especially with them, the sector they are in, very sensitive. You need them to go to work on time, and but obviously the buses would fill a gap, would fill a hole in their traveling experience. It is really a nightmare, really, particularly when it comes to the rainy season.
And I guess they'll also be able to save money, because if they'd had to pay out of their own pockets to catch a bus or taxi or whatever, they're not going to have to do so. So that's more money that they can retain for,
the convenience, the money you will save. Absolutely, there are many advantages to this sort of thing. Of course, in the end, we'll probably go to it that maintenance would be the issue. But because we've got the experience there now.
But it's funny you mentioned that, because at the launch, this was the sort of thing that came up. And in fact, it was revealed that, in fact, they've actually trained people in maintaining these specific buses to make sure that, because of the amount of usage that they're going to be getting, and because of how important they are, to actually, the whole thing that we're always complaining about, the kind of lack of maintenance culture. But one of the things that surprised me was that, why has it taken so long for us to have this sort of service for our doctors and nurses? I mean, why has it?
Yes. should the borough government had done it, because beside the 3 years, we have to go back to Yaya Jammeh.
Sure.
And that period, we know that the system had really broken down in many ways. So I personally didn't really expect much about that period. So now, within this period, should it have happened earlier? Within the 3 years, I do not know. Possibly so.
Yeah, because
possibly so.
We hear about doctors and nurses being important to the health of the nation. I guess when something like this happens, it shows that it goes beyond mere words. They're actually doing something constructive. So a good initiative, and let's hope it's something that carries on. So thanks again for that, Mr. Mroj. Now, there's a new college at Basse. It's the first. This is the statistic that shocked me. It's the first teacher training college to be built in this country since 1957. No, that's not a mistake. 1957. And interestingly, it's not been built in Banjul or Greater Banjul. It's actually outside of Greater Banjul. And so let's have a quick look at the clip where we hear some students talk about some of the challenges in spite of the fact that they welcome this new college.
Convey students concerned about adequate full-time lecturers.
We have only 3 people here who are, college lecturers. All the others are, part-time, you understand? So we will also like, if at all we can have full-time lecturers here, that would be very good.
There we heard students of the new college at Basse talking about some of what they expect. I have to say, one of the things that I was both surprised and delighted at, I spoke to our colleagues who went there, was they praised the standard of the build of the school, and also they praised the fact that, as I mentioned, it wasn't in the Greater Banjul area, it was in Basse. Again, I mentioned first since 1957. What are your thoughts on all of those?
Absolutely. Early on we were talking about how to create the structures in the provinces for people to remain.
Sure.
This is really
classic
part
example.
Of that. Classic example of that. Oh, fantastic! In Basse, it's a huge town. You know what I mean? And it can be. It will attract.
Of course, people from around that area,
around the satellite,
yeah.
sort of over there. And I understand it's quite big. They've already taken 100 students, and they've got 2 dorms, isn't it? Male, female, and that sort of thing. For a long time, it was being touted as a state-of-the-art facility, that sort of thing. So it was quite interesting to learn that. Yeah, there are basic problems. It might be state-of-the-art in terms of the buildings, but in terms of the services, there are certain basics that are yet to be
Yes,
to be put
the students seemed quite pleased with what they had,
Yes.
good toilet facilities, good bathroom facilities. But one of the things that they mentioned was that it's all well and good having this, but they complained about the food, the type and the sort of lack of variety, shall we say, of food. And also they complained about the lecturers, and I was quite surprised, both the number and actually one of them said even the standard of lecturers. Is this a case of putting the cart before the horse?
Very possibly, because really, why have an annex when you do not have an adequate number of lecturers?
When I heard that, I must admit, what my first thought was that perhaps because it's new, they've not been able to attract people who might be, again, sort of Banjul and Greater Banjul, to go there, to move there, to actually be based there and teach there. And perhaps that's, what they have. But I guess it's a case of enticing them. And how do you entice them?
Absolutely.
Do you pay them more? Do you pay the kind of, when they do it in other countries, you get a sort of fee for the fact that you're not living in the city?
Yes, and why can't I wait? I do not understand. I have to get things right before we begin. We don't want to begin things and be giving you half-hearted, half-baked things. One shouldn't really want that. So, but now what is the plan? It's there. They don't have permanent lecturers, they say. But what is the number of lecturers they have? What are the gaps?
And I think another thing that was sort of seen as missing, and they wondered why it was being opened now rather than in 6 or 8 or 9 months' time, because apparently all the landscaping around is not completed yet. So, you know, the gardens that are meant to be built, and there seem to be quite a lot of things. So it seemed rather odd that you're having people move in and there's all this work going to be going on around them. And why do you think they opened it now rather than sort of 8 or 9 months down the line?
Absolutely. One wonders why. I mean, you see the coincidence. There's a rally there. There are all sorts of things there. Is one trying to make political capital out of it by putting it at the same time, and sort of you will get the shine,
yes,
if you like. Absolutely, it will make one wonder about that. We do not know his motivations, but again, the coincidence, the whole situation.
I mean, let's not. I hope people don't think we're sort of knocking this particularly, because one of the things that impressed me was that it was from the laying of the foundation stone to its completion. We're talking about a year and 2 months, and that was quite impressive given the size, the sort of structures that are there, and what's in place. So I think, you know, we have to give them credit for that at least.
Certainly nobody's denying that. It's a fantastic, brilliant idea, and the achievement, it's all there. Yet we must also talk about the other stuff. You still have permanent lecturers there. They need that. That should have been really taken care of. You take your time, bring the right inducements. You will get the lecturers you want. If you want a high standard, I'm sorry, it's expensive. You're going to have to spend for it. I'm pay for it. You know, if you want to compromise, well, it's your choice. It's a marketplace out there. What kind of standards do you want? You have to pay for it.
Well, I hope the authorities are watching and listening, and I hope you'll heed what Mr. Mboj has just said, because I think there's a lot of sense in that. And now on to our next subject of discussion. Tangier Arabic School being bequeathed with a new library, and it's quite interesting. Just watch this clip, and then when we come back, we'll tell you why it's interesting.
In ceremony, Barbara Somers, the trip facilitator for the students coming from Wilforth School, tells us more about the relationship between the two schools, while stressing the need for sustainability.
The responsibility we took is to connect Dutch students to Cameroon students, to give support to their school. And the last 2 weeks they worked together to renovate this school. So I can feel proud about their work, and about the interaction.
We heard Barbara Somers, I think her name is, talking there. And what was interesting is that these were people from the Netherlands who came here. And I did ask my reporter to ask them if any of them were Muslims, and I don't think any of them were. So it was quite interesting that they came and built quite a very nice library from what we could see for an Arabic school. What were your thoughts on that?
Quite instructive, really. I mean, humanism, it doesn't have borders.
That's right. I mean, and that's what, you know, because obviously in the Gambia for many a year we've been talking about the kind of peaceful coexistence. We've seen it ruptured recently. Let's not pretend, you know, the S word from the Constitution, which we won't mention here. But when I saw that, it was quite heartwarming to see people who were actually, you know, they weren't Gambians, they weren't even from Africa. I did question why they were all wearing kente cloth, mind you. But as you said, the sort of human element of it, I thought was quite great that they were given, and you know, nobody sort of forced them to come. They came freely.
Absolutely. Yes, that is what one should expect. They're using human feeling. I'm sure there was somebody who had contacts with them. So when you follow personal relationships and you are honest to it, and you wouldn't allow certain ideological or religious precepts, you know, abstractions to vitiate, to really spoil your human relationships. And you are right, overall here, the proverbial peaceful coexistence we've been known for a long time, even Christians and Muslims. Recently, it has been on the stream.
True.
Really, we've got this recent experience, somehow the effects of which this is one of them. This is one of the effects of this. But Gambians being Gambians, we'll walk it through somehow in our slow, snail-paced, we are the Scorpions after all, our football team.
But we'll get there. We'll get there. But you're right, and as I said, quite heartwarming when I saw it. I was quite impressed, both with the gesture and I think also with the structure of the place. It was really quite good to see. And we spoke to some of the students, and they were sort of very, very positive about their experience. And in fact, several of them said they would come again to the Gambia. So a good experience, and let's hope. And I smile because I take your words about upkeep and maintenance. Let's hope the library is maintained to the standard in which it has started. Something we're not very good at, and I not just mean Gambia, across Africa we seem to have a problem with maintenance. But once again, thank you for that, Mr. Mboj.
Thank you.
And now the next one we're going to discuss is about Tresor Women Warriors. I must admit I'd never come across or heard of them until we were asked to go and cover an event featuring them. And let's have a quick look at this, and then once again when we come back we'll discuss the matter.
Women farmers play an important role in the social and the economic development of the Gambia. Over 91% of our upland rice fields, women are engaged in the production, and almost 96% of our swamp rice, women are engaged in that production. And in the area of horticultural crop production, almost 88% of Gambian women who are engaged in agriculture are engaged in vegetable production. You see how women are coming.
Tresor Women Warriors. And what this organization is all about is about empowering women to be financially independent. Something that is, sometimes people are surprised because in this country a lot of women actually are involved in trading and business. And yet when one listened to what they had to say here, Mr. Mboj, I think I was surprised at how they say, how the sort of patriarchal society ends up holding women back from actually making steps in terms of financial independence.
Absolutely, in all indices you follow, women are always at the bottom, always behind the men. That is patriarchy. And this is one of the ways, having these associations, these organizations to help women come up. That is one of the ways of really dealing with it. I mean, this historical baggage, as it were, against them. That's one of the ways of dealing with that.
And I remember last year when they launched the Gambia Women's Chamber of Commerce, similar things were said. And also you had the Senegalo Gambian Women leadership program. I mean, do you see, I guess having named those three, it's obviously a sign that there are more and more of these happening where they're trying to empower women and so on. But do you think this is an uphill battle, or do you think it's one that they can win?
Wow, generationally.
Yeah.
These institutions, they have a role to play, but in the end, society must evolve into that kind of mindset.
Yes.
We all know the social ideologies, the social ideas that really keep women behind, really, stomping them behind. So it will change, but it will be very difficult. It has to be generational to carry the social with them. Even though in the short term, this is all that we can do in many ways. These institutions, and perhaps even using the courts, where the state agencies that are supposed to deliver are not delivering.
Indeed.
Then we use the legalistic stuff and advocacy.
Sure.
So in the long run, these little steps, the streams would sort of pan out into a river.
Eventually, yes. Well, let's hope so. I mean, I must admit, when I came here last year or year before, and I happened to go to various offices, and it was Ramadan, and the women were all going home early. And I asked why that was, and I was told, well, so they can go home and prepare the iftar meal. Doesn't sound much like equality to me. I mean, are these some of the things we have to fight against?
Well, maybe some people will tell you it is equality with division of labor. The women would do this and men would do that.
Sure.
And in the end, and these feminist sort of modern Western intellect, the left, these ideas would come in here, but they have to tussle. Sure. This is not a vacuum.
Yeah.
So there's a certain embedding, a social, deeper embedding, and the way we mix them, it wouldn't be like what's happening in the West. We will have to innovate. We are different, so it will show itself rather differently.
Food for thought there. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. Let's take another quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be discussing, again, something to do with development. Stay with us.
tey nag su street stock bi ak Inco la kaay la ñu xool liggéeykat bi ak bagage yi Inco. noo gisee bagage boo use ni
bagage bi dëgër na garanti na yaaga na ak Inco dafa mel ni yaa ngi téye àdduna si sa loxo.
non macha allah suma liggéey bi peeli Inco ak pusi Inco macha allah gaawal liggéey tara nga peel doo si soona.
ñun welda mane de bagage yi Inco lañ dee gën a use because moo gën a wóor.
ñun mi liggéey aluminium bagage yi Inco lañ dee gën a jëfoo cause mooy lu óor si ñun.
ak Inco bagage yu baax leen amee te quality lii mooy seen brand lii mooy seen kola foo munti gis bagage bu baax rek Inco la ma ne ak Inco si nekkee private sector la government sector individual képp koo xam ne rek da nga bëgg a sampa wala weldaman nga maçon nga kapinta nga kaay Inco dina la jaay bagage yu baax te correct te seela te bagage yooyu noonu nag dafa ànd ak garantie ak Inco àdduna bi mu ngi si sa loxo.
Onion blanc, a little mustard, a little mayonnaise. Little Kitchen Express, waañ yëpp ay bànneex la.
And welcome back. And just before the break there, we were talking about the role of women. And I guess delivering babies is still the role of women. And a new maternity ward was unveiled in Fas Njaga Choi. Let's have a quick clip on that. And then when we come back, we'll delve some more into what exactly was around the launching of the inauguration of this maternity ward.
The facility has no ambulance, which also make delays and may cause death. The other issue is the facility also don't have laboratory services, which can also cause another delays and may cause life. Because if we do send to SF for laboratory to find out or make some investigation. So we therefore thanking the helping charity and other NGOs who can, and the government who can also kindly help the facility in affording those things.
And there we heard one of the speakers at that inauguration event, new maternity ward in Fas Njaga Choi. Now, this is something that when we discussed, my colleagues in the office, they were saying that, in fact, it's probably one of several that are going to be, will need to be opened. Are you surprised that there are so few?
Well, yes and no, if you know what I mean. There should be many of them. You know what I mean? That's be taken for granted. But again, what's been happening recently, wonder that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because all the money was diverted elsewhere. Here with these things, what I'm thinking is that, are they sort of ad hoc? A maternity ward here, something else there, is there a strategy
Sure.
behind all this isolated, so far it seems like all these isolated additions here and there? Is there a wider strategy? Already we were told about, yes, fine, wonderful, the word is there, but again there are quite a good number of shortcomings there.
Well, indeed, I mean, and I think the point you've just made there is a valid one, because again, the discussion in the office was around exactly that point, funnily enough, about is this part of a coordinated strategy? And also, it's all fine and good having a maternity ward in a particular area, but are there support services for that maternity ward rather than building a maternity ward? Are there enough hospital ambulances to take people if something happens and it's a complicated birth, to take them from there to the next place where they could be properly dealt with? So, you know, you're right. And I guess I was going to ask you about, are you aware of whether there is a coordinated strategy so that these are built in various places in a way that actually there's a linkage and there's a sort of reasoning and thought behind it?
Absolutely. I mean, Bin Wali Juf, the alcalde there, said that they need an ambulance. There's no ambulance. And they needed nurses, more nurses. So already we are seeing there some of the shortcomings. So whether there's a strategy, I'm sure when you talk to the minister, they'll probably tell you there is. But visibly, what we are seeing, we would like to see a clearer pattern. You know, demonstrating that there's a strategy behind this so-called developmental moves.
A great point. I wish to hear, Mr. Minister, I hope you're listening. We'd love to see that strategy, and perhaps you'll come on Viewpoint to talk about it. Who knows? And now on to something outside of the Gambia, and we're talking about child soldiers in South Sudan. A very quick clip here. Watch this, and when we come back, we'll delve into this story some more.
Children and adolescents were abducted and used as child soldiers during the 5-year civil war. Here at Tinduka Vocational Center, some of them are starting to find their feet again. Like Christian, he was captured by an armed group at the age of 13. For years, many of the former female child soldiers have little children. Anna is now training in sewing. With her new skills, she hopes to make some money to pay for the future education of her little boy. And hers. She dreams of becoming a doctor. With the support of trained psychologists who do trauma counseling and the prospect of a long-term job, as well as peace and stability, Christian has...
And there we were watching child soldiers in South Sudan being rehabilitated. Mr. Mboch, I find South Sudan a tragic story. A country newest in Africa had barely come into being than it descended into civil war. I mean, what do you think? I mean, these young children having their lives seized when it should have been a moment of joy.
The familiar pattern, isn't it? Just after independence, somehow you're trying to flex. I mean, I don't know, you haven't done it for a while, you haven't ruled yourselves for a while, so suddenly you're faced with having to run a country.
Yeah.
Effects, having to give us outcomes.
Sure. I mean, what I find intriguing about this is that, as you rightly say, you know, the whole thing of trying to come to terms with running, they fought with what is Sudan to become South Sudan. Then they became a country. We had, you know, our not near neighbor, Guinea-Bissau, since independence from the Portuguese, has also been struggling to become a functional, it's very much a dysfunctional country still. But the child soldiers, I mean, how does one go from being a child soldier, if people had seen the longer report on that, which mentioned them saying that there were times when we had to beat adults or be beaten, or kill adults or be killed. I mean, watching that, I was quite upset watching it, because you're looking at children who are sort of 13, 14, 15.
But we've been seeing this sort of thing here, isn't it? I mean, even in Sierra Leone. They were child soldiers
in Liberia.
with his uncle in Liberia, the Lord's Army.
Yes, in Uganda.
In Uganda, and all the rest of it. This is it. For some reason, this is what we've come to see. I mean, because we are war-torn, so already certain norms have broken down within the society. We are war-torn. People are fighting for power, and then you've seen what apparently to use children as killing machines.
Indeed.
They could be very effective at it, given the naivety, the innocence.
Indeed.
This is what they exploit. So yes, so this whole place was destroyed by it. But luckily, you're right. Now there's a fragile piece, granted, in that place. But when you have such schemes, so you're giving them hope.
Indeed, I mean they're being taught things like motor mechanics, carpentry, bricklaying, and what I found quite poignant was when they said in the report, in the longer report, we're actually teaching some of these 14, 15-year-olds how to be mothers because they had children at 12 or 13.
That was one of the ladies, the young girl. It's really a young girl. What she said when they were taken, when they abducted, they had to be the wives of the boys.
Indeed.
So inevitably you have that extra element of children being involved as well. So the casualty list is really long and different circles.
Quite. Well, there's been more talk of peace this week in South Sudan. Let's hope this one is a lasting and everlasting one, and we'll watch that with interest. But once again, thank you, Mr. Mboch.
Thank you.
And now on to our last story. The British High Commissioner Sharon Wardle presided over the opening of it's a horse and donkey trust. Let's have a quick look, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss some of the wider things around that trust. Just take a quick look.
The British High Commissioner Sharon Wardle spoke of her delight and said raising awareness is the most essential tool for promoting animal welfare.
But more importantly, I think not only is the centre doing a lot to take care of animals who've been injured or are suffering in different ways, but they're doing a huge amount to raise awareness about the importance of animal welfare here in the Gambia. I will do what I can to raise awareness and generate interest, and I'm personally extremely committed to animal welfare.
British High Commissioner Sharon Wardle speaking there at the Horse and Donkey Trust. Now, Mr. Mboch, one of the things that came through loud and clear from many of the people who were speaking there who were not Gambians was this thing about the sort of lack of animal welfare in this country. I mean, you've lived abroad, you know how they think of animals in other countries. What do you think of something like this, like the trust?
Oh, one cannot knock it. Yeah. Obviously, in itself, I mean, for any civilized society, we have to put it that way, for any civilized society, it is a measure of my decency, it's a measure of my humanity, if I take care of sentient beings that depend on me.
That's right. And in the report, actually, one of the speakers there said actually that sometimes humans fail to realize that animals have feelings too. They feel everything that we feel, right from pain to jealousy. She said, and went on to say that actually what we're doing is that we're not just looking after these animals here, we're actually inviting Gambian farmers who use animals in their daily work, like donkeys and so on, to say actually if you care for them, you'll get more out of them than if you abuse and mistreat them. I mean,
absolutely. I mean, as one of the ladies, one of the participants there observed that the so-called maltreatment is not because of cruelty. They said maybe some kind of ignorance, a certain attitude, a certain outlook.
Yes, indeed.
That can be tweaked,
yes,
as it were, and then you begin to see things differently. So there must be that engagement, constant engagement with them, and I think one can turn.
And what I particularly liked about it, when we send, as we always do when we send our reporters, we always say speak to everybody there who might be affected by this. So some of the farmers who were there actually were quite open and honest and saying, you know what, I felt ashamed having been told some of the things I was told when I came here, and I would definitely change my ways. I mean, you hope that they weren't just saying this for effect, but it seemed and it sounded genuine. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think with a lot of people, and we have to be honest with this, really had simply not thought about it. It can be just as simple as that. Had simply not thought about it. How many times have you reminded somebody of something or given an idea to somebody and who'll go and use it?
Quite.
Had simply not thought about it. I mean, the pain, maybe he could explain the pain in all sorts of ways. But when you bring it to the attention, it's actually, this one is feeling pain. I think you might persuade a few, at least, to be mindful, to be watchful of what they do.
And I think what they tried to do was give them food for thought. And food for thought is what we try and give you on this program every week. Thanks for watching. And before we close, I'd like to once again thank my partner in crime, Mr. Mamadou Mbodj. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Join us again same time next week for some more interesting stories from home and abroad. Thanks for watching.